It's time for us to start our meeting, and we've also formed a quorum. So please invite the officials and the deputations to come in. Thank you. We have two parts today with 18 deputations, so we should be able to complete them in an hour. And then we members will discuss with the administration. Of course, including the responses from the administration, we may have 3 to 5 more minutes for discussion. So welcome, government representatives. We'll wait for the deputations to be seated. Deputations, you can be seated in accordance with your name plates. Welcome, government officials and deputations. I'd like to remind the deputations that you have earpieces on your seats. Channel 0 floor, Channel 1 Cantonese, Channel 2 English, and Channel 3 Putonghua. So you can choose your own channel. I'll call upon you to speak according to your seat numbers. You'll be given 3 minutes each. Please be reminded that you're not protected by KEP 382 Electoral Powers and Privileges Ordinance, so you have to bear the consequences of your remarks, because you do not enjoy protection and immunity under the ordinance. Are you ready? Government, can you introduce the content of the paper to us? Within 5 minutes, please. Ms. Lee? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The government is very concerned about the needs of new arrivals, and all along through a great deal of support services been assisting the new arrivals. We have a paper, New Arrivals, Poverty Statistics and Support, and the paper is already briefed you on the details. So I'd like to highlight the points here. According to the Hong Kong Poverty Situation Report 2012, after considering the intervention of cash support, in 2012, there are over 30,000 new arrival households who are living below the poverty line. As regards their socio-economic features, almost 70% of these new arrival poor households were 3-person or 4-person families, and most of them, about 83%, had children. Besides, 9.1% of them were single-parent poor households. Among all the new arrival poor households, 70.4% have working members. As for these working members in these new arrival poor households, on the average, 1.1 persons work, and the average number of children is 1.3. For new arrivals with needs, they can apply to the major government financial assistance schemes. On the 17th of December 2013, the Court of Final Appeal, CFA, held that the residence requirement under the CSSA scheme should be lowered from 7 years to 1 year, that is, restoring the 1-year residence requirement, implemented before the 1st of January 2004. Persons under the age of 18 will continue to be exempted from the residence requirement under the CSSA scheme. It's clearly stated in the judgment that it was specific to the CSSA scheme and should not be applied generally to the application arrangements for other government assistance programs. From the date of the judgment in December up to the 27th of June this year, the Social Welfare Department, the SWD, received 5,567 applications involving persons having resided in Hong Kong for less than 7 years. Besides, in the 2014 policy address, it's announced that there would be a low-income working family allowance with two major considerations. First, we understand that many grassroots are the sole breadwinners of their families. Although they are protected by the statutory minimum wage, the livelihood burden is rather heavy. To provide them with appropriate support and encourage employment will guard against their falling into the CSSA scheme. We're also concerned about the children and youngsters in these families. To provide them with appropriate support will help with upward mobility. The LIFA has not set any residency requirement. Therefore, a new arrival satisfying the requirements under the scheme in relation to working hours, income and asset test and so forth, they can apply for the low-income working family allowance, the LIFA. As for welfare support services, the government's policy is to provide welfare support for individuals and families in need, including new arrivals. The 65 Integrated Family Services Centers, IFSCs, and 2 Integrated Services Centers, ISCs, provide a spectrum of preventive, supportive, and remedial welfare services. As for people suffering from family and individual problems because of cross-boundary residency, work services will be provided by the International Social Service Hong Kong branch, ISSHK. There is a cross-boundary and inter-country casework service to provide services. And there are other services provided, including intake inquiries, employment counseling, and special placement schemes to assist new arrivals to find jobs. In accordance with the needs of the new arrivals, all placement centers have dedicated counters to provide particularly employment referrals for new arrivals. And these placement centers will regularly conduct talks on employment. And there's also an information webpage to give them employment information and enhance their job-seeking skills. Thank you. So, deputations, 3 minutes each. First of all, Ms. Chung-yan. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members. For this poverty issue related to new arrivals, it has attracted broad concern in society. In fact, we have conducted a long-time survey to provide opinion to the government in the hope that we can assist the new arrivals to integrate into society. We hope that the government can start training programs such that potential new arrivals can attend such programs, so they don't need to wait till they arrive in Hong Kong to slowly get adapted to the situation in Hong Kong and receive training. Once they get their one-way permit, they can, as soon as possible, join the workforce and get integrated into society. To the job market of Hong Kong, this will definitely be a merit. As for overaged children, we can also provide special training to them. As for Hong Kong's job market, labor market, we can also make certain arrangements for them. Through consultation with mainland authorities, for the present quotas for couples separated on both sides of the boundary, we would like to shorten the separation period from 4 years to 3 years or below. And for couples being separated for more than 10 years, we would like to shorten the period further. This is to expedite family reunion. We believe that by doing so, we can address their adaptation problems and prevent tragedies or reduce tragedies. The Hong Kong government and the central authorities in vetting one-way permit applications should give a transitional period. That is, when the new arrival comes to Hong Kong and cannot get adapted to Hong Kong, their status in the mainland should be kept for 2 years. That means we shouldn't make it a road of no return, because if we don't do so, a person that cannot get adapted to the situation of Hong Kong will be forced to remain here. As for jobs, training, and support for new arrivals, if we can provide them actively and positively, then the chance of these people get adapted to Hong Kong will rise, and that will benefit our labor market. Next, Ms. Cynthia Chung. Well, I'm born in Hong Kong and brought up in Hong Kong. So were my parents. But I am not proud of Hong Kong because we don't have priorities and welfare protection here. The Hong Kong government has obtained money from taxpayers. What has it done? What about the new arrivals? Once we hear this term, we immediately think of the mainlanders. If they come to Hong Kong, they claim that they are single-parent families, they have poor health conditions, the husband had passed away, they'd been cheated, they are to take care of children, so they've no way out but to receive CSSA. They don't contribute much to Hong Kong, but we have to sustain these new arrivals. But then they always claim that their motherland was so strong, so why don't they ask the mainland government to sustain them? What about discretion? For this year, 3,000 odd cases. There are CSSA recipients from those with less than 7 years of residency. They're all approved, so there's no discretion. Now, even with 1 year of residency, they can apply for CSSA. So you're encouraging people to come to Hong Kong to reap benefits. So even after they come to Hong Kong and take out a divorce, they can get CSSA. They say that they have low educational levels, they don't have knowledge, but they can work as laborers and earn $10,000 or part-time cleansing workers. They can sustain themselves and maintain a livelihood. So before they come to Hong Kong, they should do some calculation whether or not they can sustain themselves in Hong Kong. They shouldn't come to Hong Kong and say that they don't have money and want to get CSSA. That shouldn't be the case. We in Hong Kong cannot say that, oh, here we are poor, we cannot sustain ourselves, so we go elsewhere to get CSSA. And there's nothing to say about this. They say that there's no schooling for their children. But in Hong Kong, we have scholarships, your accommodation and food are taken care of. $480,000 were reaped by a top-notch student just recently. So you got loans, but tax are paid by Hong Kong people. And these new arrivals who do not contribute to Hong Kong enjoy their benefits. CSSA is given to the new arrivals. If we pay so much tax, there shouldn't be any problem. The senior government officials should address this poverty issue. So you should dip into your own pocket to do that. Hong Kong people cannot even resolve their own poverty problem. So we shouldn't handle the poverty problem of the new arrivals first. Thank you. Mr. Henry, I'm a locally born Hong Konger. I'm not at the age of a taxpayer, but I think I understand more the plight of taxpayers. Ever since my childhood, I saw that my elders have to wake up at 7 a.m. and go to work at 8 a.m. Fortunately, they can enjoy their dinner at home, and if they're unfortunate, they can't even get off work at 12 midnight.
They have to pay back the government and contribute back to society. Now, why is it that they are willing to do that, their hard-earned money? Because they believe that the government can do better work with the money rather than wasting it on the new arrivals. They are not contributing to society, these new arrivals, and yet within 1 year they can apply for CSSA. Why should we give our taxpayers' money to them? These are hard-earned money. Are the taxpayers willing to pay them? Because they are not benefiting the taxpayers. And how will they agree to this arrangement? Now, these new arrivals to come in, we let them to come in, is humanitarian. I grant you that. But we are not obliged to help them any further. When they are here, they should make contributions. We give them the chance to do so here in Hong Kong. They should contribute to society and not to ask the millions of taxpayers who have worked very hard to pay them or to feed them. Now, we want to attract talents to come to Hong Kong in order to boost our competitiveness. But this welfare policy, I'm afraid to say, goes against this particular scheme. It will only encourage people to come here, not to develop, but they will just to eat and sleep and not contributing to society. Now, our competitiveness is decreasing. We are overtaken by Singapore and Shanghai. And with these our arrivals, we will lose our competitive edge even further. I hope the government will look at this more clearly. This arrangement is totally unreasonable. We mustn't let them have so much welfare benefit. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Now, last December, when we first started the debate after the CFA ruling, I believe most Hong Kong people will share my feeling. They don't have to wait for 7 years, but then if we work very hard and we work more than 10 hours a day, and we are not getting the same. Now, I don't think the CFA has got it wrong. It's really the administration. Now, some people come back for family reunion. That's good. That's humanitarian. That's because we give you the chance to be reunited, but not the same as giving you the CSSA. Now, many countries will require the new arrivals as well as their family to state at the outset that they are able to feed themselves. Now, some scholars have said that because of the ruling last December, the number of CSSA increment is only 670 million, and a very small percentage of the overall government spending, a fraction of a percentage point. But what about those with both parents who are not Hong Kong people, or one of them is not? Now, this is already creating a burden, and the new arrivals will also increase in number as a result. So the pressure on the Treasury will go up. And then the important source of the government's tax income is from the taxpayers. Now, the new arrivals should respect the voice of the local taxpayers. Now, it is true that the new arrivals can contribute to the Hong Kong workforce, but ruling out those who are 15 and under, now more than half of them among these arrivals, they are not doing any economic activities, and they are mostly women and students. Now, it's not because they are not contributing in Hong Kong and we want to kick them out, but we want to let them know that we are the Hong Kong people here. We are the local people here. So let's go back to the basic point. How come there is such a strong reaction from the Hong Kong people? That's because the local people are poor. They are not really that well off. If we are very, very rich, of course we don't care whether you get the CSSA or not. Now, so the government should deal with the problem of economic insufficiency among the local people, as well as to have an effective immigration policy. Hong Kong is a very interesting place. Before coming here to Hong Kong, the new arrivals in mainland China can survive. They are very able to come here and then to apply for CSSA here. They could work in the mainland, but not in Hong Kong. That's very, very strange. I have heard a friend from the catering industry. Now, as long as you can speak some Cantonese, you can do the work. I wonder how much resources has the government put in to teach the new arrivals Cantonese. Now, they are not even using Putonghua, they're using their own dialect. They use very broken Putonghua. Now, I cannot possibly hire them. Now, how much resources has the government spent on helping these new arrivals? And how is the government helping them? Is it just giving them some money? Well, if that's the case, well, give me some money to help me. You don't have to tell me so many things. Now, there are more than 5,000 such people, and it will go up to 8,000. But the fact is that the 5,000 people are here. So what is to be done? Now, these new arrivals, of course, they are not going for CSSA, all of them. But if they can get it within 1 year, well, they come here for various reasons, reunion and other things. But how come you cannot have union in the mainland? And those speaking on their behalf, they are even a stranger, more difficult to understand. This whole thing is really distorted. The whole picture is distorted, and we are not using our public resources properly. Now, putting it very briefly, we have very limited resources. Now, of course, if it is unlimited like air, then you are not complaining that people are breathing in. But not so for our money. How come the government is getting so generous? If you say that they have the right, then you can set up a fund and pay them and not be generous on behalf of the Hong Kong taxpayers. Now, I hope all of you, government officials, can be very, very fair and seriously consider the issue. I'm Wong Kah-yam. Now, I have heard some misunderstanding about the new arrivals. Now, the definition of the new arrivals. Now, the Hong Kong government, when giving Hong Kong ID cards to these people, they have recognized them as Hong Kong people, and they should be protected by law. As to whether they are permanent or not is really another issue. Now, I have heard serious misunderstanding, and that is because we are not really having enough spreading of information. Now, through these sharing, many secondary school students will understand more. Now, how come that they can survive in the mainland? Because once they are here in Hong Kong, they have lost their account, so they will no longer have any benefits from the mainland because they have lost their mainland account. So they are not getting any help. Now, for reunion, now they don't have to come to Hong Kong for reunion or in the mainland for reunion. If you have a spouse, one of them born in different places, then they should be able to choose which side they want to be reunited. Now, on limited resources, I understand that the government situation. But even if you are a permanent resident, if you draw a line somewhere regarding your salary level, above which you are not going to get any help, now is this reasonable? Now, I think they should get a very basic protection. Now, on the point about CSSA, now there are 5,000 plus eligible people, but since the CFA ruling until today, because of the 7-year requirement, they could not get the benefit. But once the ruling was relaxed, of course, the number will shoot up. Now, if you look carefully, the figure has come down to about 20 applicants per day. Now, you cannot use the peak number for calculation. Now, as a Hong Kong person, they should enjoy basic protection. It's not a matter about the government having enough money. We should not deprive people of their rights. I represent myself as well as the party. Now, there is a lot of discrimination and misunderstanding about the new arrivals, but as far as I'm concerned, these new arrivals are a very precious asset for Hong Kong and can help Hong Kong. I believe most of them want to fend for themselves and to develop in Hong Kong. But then they are working under a lot of constraints and limits because they can't even speak the language properly, for example, and they are still trying to adapt to the environment. Now, about 70%, now that's the figure I have, about 70% of them are poor even though they have a job. Now, they are hardworking. Now, how come they are so poor? Because they have to feed more people. They have to feed 2.3 mouths, and then their salary is on the low side. And one reason is they are not very well educated, so the jobs they take up are low-skilled jobs. And secondly, because their mainland qualifications are not recognized in Hong Kong, maybe they have reached senior secondary school, but that is not recognized in Hong Kong. So then they cannot take up certain jobs, so they can only take up certain low-skilled jobs. And that's why they are poor. And because they have to feed many mouths, and there's a lot of pressure, and they have to seek help. Now, the Hong Kong government should help them, definitely, to help them integrate into society and to become a new force in Hong Kong. Now, the Hong Kong government is treating them as an ordinary Hong Kong person, and then the social worker responsible should look at them as an average person. Now, if they are not speaking the language properly, or if they need other help, then there should be follow-up assistance. But I think that is really lacking. Now, some new arrivals, the women in particular, they very much like to find work to do. But then they have to look after children or elderly people in the family. And so they cannot really work. Now, the CFA ruling, as you can see, there are several thousand applications, and I believe more will be coming. Now, if this door is open, then there will be a dominoes effect, and then there will be pressure on public housing and so on. We are paying so much tax, and the tax has to be spent properly to help the disabled people, the elderly. That's fine. but you are asking us to feed the people who are lazy, then I will say no. Of course, if you are not paying tax, then you are seeking help from other people, then that's understandable. But we are taxpayers, and the money should be spent appropriately.
Cheating the CSSA scheme, the government said that it had surveys, but then the CSSA recipients are very smart. Let's look at an example. For those receiving rental assistance under the CSSA scheme, if the rental subsidy is $4,000, they will pay a month's deposit for an SDU, and then after a month, they give up their unit. They are clever. They know that the SWD will send them mail items, so they use redirection services such that the letters from the SWD will still go to the new residents. So there are a lot of ways and means to cheat the CSSA scheme. And then the wives and children of these new arrivals come to Hong Kong. They ask social workers and counselors to help them. They want to receive CSSA. But before they come to Hong Kong, they should do some calculation to see whether or not they should come. They know that Hong Kong people are rich. When they come, they can enjoy welfare services. Very good. You have to change the attitude and mentality of these new arrivals. Don't just ask for benefits. For 3 months or 6 months, if they can't find a job, they should self-finance themselves. With a pair of hands, you must be able to find a job. Some elders rather pick cardboard paper than to receive CSSA. I know we should have harmony with the new arrivals, but we shouldn't turn them a burden on us. We should not spend taxpayers' money randomly and casually. We should not randomly and casually distribute welfare. So don't do so. The middle class is silent, but that doesn't mean that we can be easily bullied. Our money must be well used. Just think about those Hong Kong people who are applying for PRH. They've been waiting for a long time, and they cannot apply for CSSA even if they want to do so. So I urge the government to do something. Help them change their poverty, help them change their mentality. Next, Liberal Party, Mr. Dominic Lee. Mr. Chairman, it's worthy of our concern. That is, we should look at the new arrivals and their poverty. But we must look at the root of the problem and not the prima facie phenomenon. The new arrival policy may be importing poverty. For our new arrival policy, we have 150 one-way permit quotas. The income, job, and affordability of the applicants are not under any basic requirements. So, we're talking about these new arrivals who need basic welfare. They are enjoying much higher benefits than Hong Kong people. We have more lenient welfare policy for new arrivals when compared with other jurisdictions. For the USA, a new arrival is to stay for 5 years before benefiting from welfare policies. In Canada, it's even more strict. There must be a guarantor, either an institution or an individual, to serve as a guarantor for affordability. In Hong Kong, a person staying on for a year can apply for CSSA. In the past year, there are thousands of applications already. Mr. Wong denied that, saying that that's an extreme case, where every year we had extreme cases. And for new arrivals applying for PRH, a judicial review is underway. So that will affect those new arrivals who genuinely need CSSA. There's no good policy for one-way permit holders. And with this new arrival policy, objectively, every day we're importing poverty. Every day we're creating heavy burden on Hong Kong's finance. It is impossible for us to resolve all these issues. To solve this new arrival problem, we must review our new arrival policy. That is, to target the root of the problem. For a new arrival who has not worked in Hong Kong, has not paid tax in Hong Kong, we must not allow him or her to just get benefit from us. Hong Kong people have been working very hard for years to accumulate such wealth. Just now, Ms. Cheung was very correct. We should talk to the central authorities so as to retain their status on the mainland for a period of time. As for family reunion, there should be a choice. If a person wants to live on the peak, does that person have an option? Accommodation depends on financial affordability. 200,000 people are queuing up for PRH. 1 million people are living below the poverty line. Poverty is serious in Hong Kong. Why don't we concentrate our resource on resolving local poverty? So please address poverty at its root. Next.
Need help us to build this region into this financial center in Asia. And Hong Kong had been prompt to offer all those migrants comprehensive social security assistance for people in need who have been here for over 7 years. But now it has been lowered to 1. And not surprisingly, after only 3 weeks of the implementation of this rule, in January this year, 1,407 new applications were received from people who have been living in Hong Kong less than 7 years. And what this number tells us is that the situation shows that the government is falling in a trap of extending social welfare measures to alleviate poverty. But what is in fact happening is that Hong Kong is increasing the amount of poor people here. If granting arbitrary permission to anyone enter and live in Hong Kong, allowing them to soon apply to SSA, will just encourage a massive inflow of people who may not be coming to work, but looking for a place where they can have benefits guaranteed without any selection. And this will cause a massive expenditure for the Hong Kong government and also for the people who work and pay taxes here now. And if there is something that the government can do to help the needy, is not to give them benefits that do not eliminate the poverty cycle, but also create conditions to people flourish in a working environment. CSSA is not the most effective way to tackle poverty, simply because it does not offer any system of encouragement for people to leave this situation where they find themselves when they apply for these benefits. Moreover, to apply for residence in the country, one must have either a proof of income or, in cases of aged persons or minors, proof that there is someone capable to support them. Who had the idea of allowing people to come here to face poverty and then be granted benefits so quickly? It's not a question of being stingy to people who are in need, but it's to allow people who already live here and expect a lot from the government to receive what they expect. And it's clear it's not a smart move to allow people to come and guarantee benefits for them after 1 year, because the taxpayers won't have their taxes raised. And if they don't pay, the government will have not enough money to comply with those benefits. And this will lead to social chaos, so people will protest and the government will not attend the needy. Is that what the administration wants? Another round of Occupy Central protests with an angrier and more bitter citizens? If not, then I guess it's high time to revoke this rule. Thank you very much.
唔該晒。宣柏雲生獅子山學會。
主席，
From the Lion Rock Institute, Mr. Andrew Xun. Well, many people are sharing their experience today. Abortion throughout the world is not a controversial issue except in the United States. If you ask me why, the reason is, in many other jurisdictions, abortion, after fierce debate in the legislature, had come to a social consensus. So there's a framework to regulate abortion. In the LegCo, we have 70 members elected. The CE got 689 votes, but the CFA judges are not like this. They don't have any public mandate. So if anything is done through the court, the result is that society will be extremely divided. For the CFA judgment based on the basic law, it has actually made this problem even more prominent. Whether or not this is a good policy, let's set aside it for a while. For assisting new arrivals to receive CSSA, if instead of a 7-year residency, only 1 year of residency is required, I wonder whether there's any social consensus. To what extent have we reached social consensus? For the election for the term 2008-2012, with a wide spectrum of candidates, none of them came out to say that we should overrule this. All right, success. Of course, somebody protested, somebody sought judicial review. The rule of the game is that if something is incorrect, you can take out a judicial review. The Lion Rock Institute understand this. So judicial review was taken out and they won. The former chairman of the Ocean Park, Mr. Zeman, I don't know whether he's still the chairman, said that Hong Kong is blocked somewhere. One of the blockages is the Basic Law, with a lot of provisions, including this particular one. Even with social consensus, a judgment based on the Basic Law was overturned. Well, our institute may not oppose reinterpretation of the Basic Law. Well, in a previous case, the CFA had actually followed the interpretation of the Basic Law. Should we not promote that we should follow the Basic Law such that Hong Kong will have autonomy for our welfare policy? Labour Party, Mr. Kelvin Zhang, in January this year, it said that within 3 weeks of the CFA judgment, the SWD office received a huge number of applicants. 8 women, new arrival women, asked for a divorce. That's very rare. District officers are very different. For our office, we've not received any CSSA case. Rather, we got dozens of cases from new arrivals to ask us to help them to get the SDU subsidy under the rental subsidy scheme. Mr. Lam, Mr. Chan, 30-odd years old, with a handicapped left hand, enrolled for a security guard training scheme, and he very soon got a job. And he successfully got $3,600 of subsidy. Mr. Chan came to me last month for a transport subsidy, but his income exceeded the limit a little bit. So $8,315 as the limit is really a bit harsh. Many grassroots workers are unable to apply. I asked a number of new arrival Kai-fongs whether they want to apply for CSSA. They said that their income is higher than the limit, and on Hong Kong Island it's not difficult for them to get jobs. So job difficulty for new arrivals are geographic in nature. For those living in remote areas, or they find it difficult to find jobs, they cannot find jobs because of their children. It's said that there are 144 centers who can provide childcare service. I got a gentleman who got a wife who had to return to the mainland once every 3 months. And during her return, there's nobody to take care of the child. But the fee for sending the child to this center is $700 to $1,000. It's quite a burden to these families. And then there are quotas on a first-come, first-served basis. As for the counseling role, in most cases it's the NGOs doing the job, so needy support may not be readily available. Take, for example, the collection of application forms. The new arrivals will have to go to these NGOs during working hours from Monday to Friday. So that means the new arrivals have to take leave. In many cases, the forms were filled out and photocopied, but there's no time for them to submit the forms, so the scheme has to be improved. Many new arrivals may not pay attention to the publicity materials of the government. Through our publicity leaflets and posters, they learned of the SDU rental subsidy and the transport subsidy scheme. So you must effect improvements.
Thank you, Chair. Now, I have heard many remarks. Some of them are pretty criticizing and cold. Now, the speaker is now quoting from a very ancient Chinese literature. And the gist of it is that if you are rich, you are able to feed even strangers. But if you are poor, you cannot really support anyone. So the gist of it is whether you can afford it or not. If you have a lot of resources, then that's a different story. Now, we have heard from the secretaries that one-way permits will facilitate family reunion, but that is not helping at all, because those Hong Kong people who are voicing opposition is not against family reunion. They are against it because they have paid tax and they do not want their resources to be robbed or shared. Now, if you are queuing for A&E section in a department, or if you have been waiting for public housing for 5 years and you don't want this queue to get even longer, now the government should do something about this. Public resources are now being thinned out. And when the people are feeling hard times, then they find somebody to blame. Okay, we have heard from the Secretary that the new arrivals have good education. Well, that is not very good, because these university graduates, let's say, will compete with our university graduates. Now, if the government's policy is perfect and remove all the disadvantages we mentioned, we are still left with problems locally, because there are local people who are not that well off. Now, so I'm trying to let the CE know you should set up a policy unit to handle the new arrivals. Okay, you have an IT bureau looking at IT stuff, or cultural affairs office looking at cultural activities. So you should do the same thing for the new arrivals, or the immigration bureau. Now, I have written a submission, so please read that for details. Maybe at this stage I ask the government officials to respond. Thank you, Chair. Now, I would like to thank all of you, individuals as well as representatives, for your views. Now, it seems that the issues center on two areas: whether they can adapt to Hong Kong after arriving in Hong Kong. And some of you have talked about the CSSA might be inappropriate for those who have been in Hong Kong for only 1 year. And I will defer to my colleagues on this point in a while. Now, but let me just respond overall. We have, or the government has, all along wanted to help the new arrivals to understand more about Hong Kong before coming here, and to help them fend for themselves. Now, regarding adapting to the new environment, now our government department responsible for this, the Home Affairs Bureau, for example, has employed agencies in Shenzhen and Guangdong province to have schemes to help those prospective new arrivals on their support networks and training programs available to them, so that they will know more about Hong Kong before coming here. And once they have arrived, and as many of you have pointed out, we should help them fend for themselves, so that they can join the market or the workforce ASAP. And we do have retraining schemes as well as schemes to help them to achieve just that. And we have dedicated courses, including how to speak Cantonese, as well as basic job skills. And we try to let the new arrivals understand the infrastructure of Hong Kong, the job market, as well as basic English, basic IT, to help them become more confident, to upgrade their soft skills, and to help them generally. Now, on the other hand, we like all of you to understand that in alleviating poverty, now we have a subsidy scheme as mentioned in the CE's policy address. And for new arrivals or even other people, we want them to be able to fend for themselves, and when they become eligible, they can apply for subsidies applicable to them. And if they get those subsidies, they cannot get CSSA at the same time. So if you are already is a recipient of CSSA, we encourage them to find work. And it is quite possible for them to leave the CSSA scheme and ask for other subsidies while working. And I think my colleagues can supplement. Mr. Zhang? Now, as Ms. Lee was saying, now since the CFA ruling, we have received about 5,000 plus applications. And the paper has also said that the peak of 170 per day has now stabilized at about 20 to 30 per day. And I would like to share with you that the eligibility for CSSA is not that as long as you fulfill the residence requirement, then you become qualified. No, you have to go through means test, a very strict means test. And secondly, if you are able-bodied and you are out of work, we want them to join a scheme to improve themselves, to receive training by NGO, and to continue to find job before they can qualify for CSSA. And thirdly, once in Hong Kong, the CSSA recipients, now if they do not meet the criteria, we have a special investigation team to tackle those who are abusing the system. And we have retired discipline officers doing such work, helping us do such work. Now, we have noticed that their family income and education level has improved and much better than when the requirement was set as 7 years some time ago. So based on all these, we believe that the people falling into the CSSA net will be reduced in number. Now, any further supplements from the government? Now, otherwise, I ask the deputations, if you have follow-up questions, just put up your hand so I have an idea how many of you want to speak further. 3 of you. I'll give you maybe 1.5 minutes each, please. Are you going to speak or are you going to ask questions? Okay, thank you, Chair. Now, I don't want to repeat points that I have made on the peak number now stabilizing and so on. Now, on some special situations that I'd like to follow up. Now, on the new arrival women applying for CSSA, they have to go through a training learning scheme first. And in fact, many of these single parents, the women, they are getting an allowance for a carer for a single mother. So this is something that the government has to handle. Now, I'd like to ask about discretion. Now, we have CSSA discretion issue. The guidelines are far from clear. Now, I would like to see a clearer guideline on how the discretion is exercised. So this is the sort of problems that our institution is facing. Now, there are other cases where, okay, new arrivals want to fend for themselves. If they are able-bodied, they want to work for themselves. But then there are no one looking after their children, so they cannot go out to work. They cannot leave somebody who is younger than 12 at home, otherwise they'll be against the law. Now, I would like to ask the government to answer a question or to respond, and that is, based on what we have in the basic law, is there anything we can do regarding the CFA's ruling within the framework of the basic law? Now, for example, extending the requirement from 1 year to 7, it was, well, mentioned both in the platform of the electoral candidates in 2008 and 2012. Now, if we were to do something to amend the law because of consensus in society, is it something the government would consider doing? Now, let me just respond to a proposal whether there is a cool-off period and then a one-way permit, then they can go back to China within 2 years. Now, because coming here, they can actually have a two-way permit. They can spend a few months here in Hong Kong. And if you ask for a cool-off period, in fact, they should have done that, achieved that, using their two-way permits. Now, there are things that are not predictable. For single parents, they come here and then they got a divorce. And then they have children to look after. So these are not predictable. And CSSA is a kind of safety net, and we're trying to help people to cater for unexpected outcomes. Now, for the new arrivals statistics, the Immigration Department should have that, and then the Home Affairs Department should also have that. And then they will be given questionnaires to fill out. Now, as a researcher, if you only collect the information within the first year, that is not enough. You should follow this up with a kind of longitudinal study. So at the first year, they have a language problem, but 3 years down the road, maybe they don't have the same set of problems. Now, I'd like to ask the government on this self-help or self-reliance scheme. Now, since you've changed to this scheme, I have met with your department, Now, before the switchover, it was some sort of a social work scheme or community work scheme. Now, I ask you, those who are able-bodied, if they were absent for such schemes. Now, I ask you two questions then. How many were absent for those training schemes? And secondly, when they were absent, what penalties were there?
Will you immediately terminate their CSSA? The answer I obtained was, there are a lot of people who are absent. Secondly, you don't have a mechanism to immediately punish these absentees from government-arranged programs. You won't suspend the CSSA. So I'd like to ask the government, can you enhance the transparency of the program? Can you enhance the announcement of the attendance rates of these CSSA recipients for your activities? If they're absent, any punitive measures? Secondly, there is this issue of guarantor. Under the Basic Law, you can't do that. You can't do something. But then what about this guarantor arrangement? Can you answer these three questions? Perhaps I should say something about self-reliance and discretion. In exercising the discretion under the present guidelines, our frontline colleagues will analyze each and every case. We look at various needs, family conditions, financial sources, other financial support, and so forth. Is there transparency? We don't agree that there's a lack of transparency. We look at each and every case and analyzing the situation. As for self-reliance, if a woman needs childcare service for the integrated self-finance program, we've commissioned NGOs to operate the program. The merit is that one-stop service can be provided by the NGOs to job seekers to provide placement services, job information, job seeking skills, where to find jobs, and so forth. For single-parent women, if they need child care service, NGOs can also provide information to them, such that they don't need to refrain from working outside because of their children. Well, after a comprehensive study, the child care service has now changed. In the past, those women only went to do environment-related jobs. Now, through NGOs, through various formats, voluntary work and work experience can be provided to these women. And for the able-bodied CSSA recipients, we'd like to boost their motivation to work. Under the self-reliance scheme, there have always been provisions to the effect that if the person does not actively seek jobs and does not carry out voluntary service, will deduct the CSSA. So they have to join some self-reliance activities. By way of this, we hope that able-bodied CSSA recipients with working capacity can attain self-reliance. Starting from April this year, under the CCF, we got a new project to, through incentives, further encourage CSSA recipients to self-finance themselves. What about Basic Law? Any response? Bureau? We understand that the Home Affairs Department has always been conducting a survey. Perhaps I should relay Mr. Chong's remarks to the Home Affairs Department. What about amending the Basic Law? I believe after the ruling, we've said that we would respect a court ruling. As for this judgment on CSSA, it only targets CSSA. As for other welfare services or welfare security systems, it won't be affected. So you won't amend the basic law. We'll respect the judgment of the court. All right, the floor is now open to members. Fernando Chung, Kwok Keung, Tan Ka-piu, and Lee Chok-yan. 4 minutes, including questions and answers. First of all, I'd like to thank the deputations for expressing their views. However, I am surprised by the remarks today. The younger generation of new arrivals have expressed their misunderstanding and hostility against new arrivals. They consider new arrivals non-Hong Kongers, but they should ask themselves, their families were also new arrivals. Why should old immigrants discriminate against new arrivals? Why should we adopt a broad brush approach to say that these new arrivals are lazy? They want to come to Hong Kong to obtain welfare. Any evidence that these new arrivals are not working, they only come for social welfare? According to the government statistics, the opposite is true. Even for the poor new arrival families, 70% are working. But then their poverty rate is appalling. That is, even after welfare transfer, over 30% of new arrival families are in poverty. We have to seriously meditate on this. Well, who are today's new arrivals, new immigrants? Most of them have married Hong Kong people. Most of them are children. Most of them are women and children. I don't understand why we should be so hasty in discriminating against these women and children. Look at our job market. The most difficult jobs, squatting in kitchens to wash dishes and bowls, security guards working 12 hours a day, and so forth. Many jobs who are not preferred by Hong Kong people are taken up by new arrivals. Today, many deputations have come to the LegCo to express such remarks. I really feel sad. On the other hand, this is also a reality. This indicates that discrimination against new arrivals is serious. A survey reveals that 90% of the new arrivals felt the discrimination. And the CPU commissioned the Hong Kong U to conduct a survey which also revealed that discrimination was serious. But today, our officials are not facing the issue squarely. This has become a deep-seated conflict in Hong Kong, conflict between Hong Kong and the mainland. Where should Hong Kong head towards in future? How should we use our land and wealth? Today, the government officials are not answering the questions. We want to know this social phenomenon of discrimination against new arrivals. What response do our officials have? Ms. Lee? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In actual fact, all along, in terms of new arrivals, the broad direction is to get them integrated into society as soon as possible. We hope that Hong Kongers can accept them, be it placement support or job training and so forth. We're doing all sorts of things to assist them to integrate into society. We'll try as far as possible to assist the new arrivals. That's our policy. Mr. Kwok. Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I have to thank the deputations for coming, irrespective of their opinion. They've taken time out to discuss with us. We really have to view this issue from the standpoint of reality. Our new arrival policy is not desirable, but then you cannot stop it. We talk about human rights. We are civilized and advanced society. We've undertaken that nobody would be starved to death in Hong Kong. On the basis of this, the government has been working very hard to do its welfare work well. Should it be 1 year or 7 years? Well, frankly speaking, it's the judgment of the court. That does not represent the attitude of the government. The government wants 7 years, but the court gave 1 year. If you want to trace the culprit, you should go to the judge. There's a common misunderstanding. Probably because of media reports, many people thought that a number of fraud cases were related to new arrivals. Theoretically, I don't believe that. Well, for figures, in 2011 to 2013, for fraud convictions related to CSSA, it's 265, 260, and 341, respectively. May I know the percentage of cases involving new arrivals? Use figures to tell us whether there are that many such cases. That will be convincing. And then at the district level, we also came into contact with a number of cases. Most arrivals want to sustain themselves and they're willing to work. But because of a number of hurdles, they cannot work. For example, they have to take care of their children. In other cases, the new arrivals have professional qualifications on the mainland, but those are totally unacceptable in Hong Kong. Take, for example, accountancy. Mainland accountants couldn't work in Hong Kong, and then mainland nurses could not work as nurses in Hong Kong because they had not taken up nursing programs in Hong Kong. So do these people have to take up study programs afresh? Should we have top-up programs, say, like those for associate degree holders, such that these new arrivals can use their professionalism and knowledge? So what has the government done? Final question. There is this suggestion that these people should be able to choose to go back to the mainland. I'd like to know the latest progress because this has been asked for a long, long time. For placement and employment, maybe I should defer to Mrs. Leung. Thank you, Chairman. Undoubtedly, the qualifications of some new arrivals may not be recognized in Hong Kong because they fail to meet the professional requirements of the professional bodies, so they cannot work. So we'll help them understand the system of Hong Kong. If they want to sit for examinations, what avenues they have, we'll provide them with information for reference. As for jobs requiring professional qualifications, we would like to find similar jobs for them, or jobs that can allow them to use their previous work experience. What about judgment? How many involving new arrivals? I don't have the information here. I'll give them to members after the meeting. What about allowing new arrivals to go back to the mainland? Have you done anything in that regard? My understanding is that according to the basic law, one-way permit applications are vetted by mainland authorities. All along, for one-way permit applications and their vettings and the right of abode on the mainland, under the latest consultation report on our population policy, a number of explanations had been given by various sectors of the community, and we've reflected these opinions to the mainland authorities. Any response from the mainland? On a need basis, we'll continue to relay our views to the mainland. Mr. Lee Chung-yan, I'm pleased to hear a friend say just now that Hong Kong is the main pitch.
更加對於新嚟嘅人呢
Well, we should be more tolerant and more accepting to make them feel that Hong Kong is also their home ground, as it were. Now, how do we let them know that respect and human rights are values that the newcomers will also share and feel? Now, I have heard views from some of you that there are certain exaggerations or magnifications, and people would say, okay, they're coming here for free lunch. This is something I understand. I understand the sentiment. And you may have read cases to give you this impression. But if you think deeper, and as long as you say words like, you know, free lunch, newcomers, they are lazy, but you have to think on the other side of the coin. There are people working around the clock almost, from 8 to 8. And they're working very, very hard. And if you talk about the new arrivals, the final issue may not be with the new arrivals. It may be because certain husbands are ill-treating their wives. So is it the case that all the men in Hong Kong are bad? Well, obviously not. But these are happening. Some husbands are not responsible, or they may have died, and resulting in these single mothers, and they come to Hong Kong, and they have a child, a son or a daughter, and they are, well, are those offsprings Hong Kong people or not? Now, we mustn't ignore the plight of these new arrivals altogether, and then just using very broad brush approach and say they're coming here after only 1 year and get benefits, and that is not good. Now, it's not as simple as that, I don't think. Now, if you can help them, or if we can help them look after their children, they can come out to work. So that's something the government should do. But then the new arrivals are finding it very difficult for daycare centers to look after their children. Now, the 5,000 cases that we were talking about, now we should look a bit deeper. Many of them are single families, or the husband is are disabled people, and those people are Hong Kong people, 100%. Maybe they are elderly, maybe they are physically handicapped, and then the wife cannot come out to work, and they have 2 children. Now, if you have these profiles, now what would your reaction be? Now, so I was asking the government to give a further breakdown of the 5,000 cases, and to provide daycare center for children, childcare center. On this last issue, maybe Mr. FUNG can respond. Now, yes, on childcare provisions. Now, apart from our daycare centers for young children, now the usage rate, or we haven't quite reached our capacity. Now, we also have after-school care service. Now, the government has put in more resources. Often, doubling the resources, $17 million especially during the long holidays and weekends, as well as after school times, as well as evening times. And this will be launched, or the enhanced scheme will be launched in October this year. And we are not relying on this alone. We are relying on social, babysitting provisions, and we are helping the organizers to improve their social work service. So we are looking at the overall scheme and to see that resources are used properly. So we have Mr. Leung first. Now on the new arrivals, now after 1997, we have seen changes in our population. We have seen significant growth in population, and if we have 150 people coming here on the one-way permit, and in 7 years' time, this will increase our population by 1 million. And this will create, different impacts on Hong Kong. Now, I have met different people in the community, those born in Hong Kong, as well as those who are new arrivals. And now, the new arrivals coming to get CSSA is not because of the lack of ability, but very often because of their family problems. Now, one case comes to mind, a young husband in his 40s, but was sent to jail. And the wife has to get CSSA because she has children. I told her to apply for CSSA. She has no other way. And this is unavoidable. Another case involves an elderly person, almost 60, married in the mainland, was a businessman with income, but after coming to Hong Kong, he was not just old, but he was seriously ill and exhausted his savings and has to rely on CSSA. They have met with a lot of difficulties. The wife doesn't know what to do and is too embarrassed to ask for help. And I believe this is very common. And as a Hong Kong person, or in my case, I am a member of LegCo, and in fact, even other people should help them go past this, to this obstacle, to at least get through this difficult stage. Now, these people may not have to rely on CSSA the whole life. Are there many people getting CSSA their whole lives? Are there many such people? Now, if CSSA can help them get through a difficult stage and then stand on their own feet, that would be a good thing. We should be able to help them. We ought to help those people. This is how we help people, tie them through a difficult time. I'd just like to ask whether the SWD, whether you have figures for people getting CSSAs throughout their lives. Okay, maybe I give them time to answer. Now, in our CSSA scheme or any other assistance scheme, we do not kind of bind them whether they would continue for the rest of their lives. We look at their economic situation. Now, if they are elderly people, we do not really rely on them leaving the scheme. But for able-bodied people, we are trying our help or trying to help them to stand on their own feet. there are definitely cases, as Mr. Leung was saying, we help them for a period of time, and then they can leave the CSSA scheme. Now, as to how we can help them do that, we are constantly looking at it to see how we can achieve that. Now, I'd like to follow up on Mr. Leung's question. Now, I hope the SWD would give us figures. Now, when do they start getting CSSA? How old were they? And how old are they now? And what changes took place? Now, because some Hong Kong people have said that those on CSSA will remain on CSSA the rest of their lives. Now, how can we help them stand on their own feet? How do we follow up on those who have lost their jobs? And in fact, Ms. Lau, you have proven that some people, well, if you organize work for them, they don't attend. Now, do you have such figures? And give us those figures after the meeting. And what percentage are we talking about? And how many have been penalized? And do they improve afterwards? What percentage is there? Now, why was I asking this question? As Mr. Lee Chung-yan was saying, people were saying that new arrivals are abusing the system, even though they are able-bodied and they don't find work. Now, is there anything you can do? Now, we have heard bosses for the SME saying that, well, don't give me any job. Now, we have heard such responses. Slung. Now, on the self-reliance scheme, Ms. Lau, now, well, there are community work or other type of support schemes. And having done this for so many years, now last year we had another review on the provisions to those who are able-bodied. Now, having run the scheme for some time, we are able to do it as a kind of one-stop help, to give them training and to help them with information so they can find jobs. Now, as to really detailed breakdown, how many we have penalized because they haven't attended those sessions. Now, we really have to go back and see if we can dig up any such information. Now, for encouraging those who are out of work to find work, in fact, under the Community Care Fund, we have a trial scheme for 3 years. We hope to reward people, those who are on CSSA because they're out of work. We encourage them to find work. And if they have found a work, we do not deduct or we do not take their salary into account in calculating their CSSAs. In other words, they can keep their total salary. And we are looking at this scheme. Yes, Chair, I understand the arrangement, but I think you've answered my question. You don't have such detailed breakdown figure. And as somebody in a management position, now, I suggest that you start collecting the figure that you lack. Now, whether your scheme is successful, maybe they continue to be out of work because the efficacy of your scheme relies on these figures. Now, I think on the whole, we have overall figures. But your question about how many people would come back after being penalized and so on, we may not have such detailed scheme. But if I manage to dig them out, I can give them to you afterwards. Mr. Cheung, I'd like to thank all of you coming here today. Okay, we have different views, but I would like to share my viewpoint too. When some people accept help, and then after a period of time they contribute to society, and if we set up obstacles to stop people from getting help, and some of these people may decide to leave, and they may have very negative feelings towards the Hong Kong society.
We observe that many CSSA recipients, individuals and families, plow back their contribution to society. Previous new arrivals are now helping today's new arrivals. We've got a lot of these examples. I have a question for the government. Just now, Mr. Frankie Yik also asked this. The present CSSA scheme is not perfect in many respects. When will you conduct a comprehensive review? It is necessary to conduct a review. Existing policies cannot be changed. Once you offer a person CSSA, you have to continue to offer him CSSA. So when will you conduct a comprehensive review? Secondly, for those people who do not want to get CSSA but they fail to find full-time jobs, if they want to have part-time jobs, how will you help them? Just now, some of the friends here said that this may not be a territory-wide issue, but a geographical issue. The Bureau just said that for childcare services, you said that there are surplus quotas. So will you conduct a review to see where the inadequacy is most serious, such that surplus quotas can be channeled there? Only by doing so can you maximize the use of resources. Don't just tell us that on the whole there are surplus quotas, so you're not going to handle the problem. That's not very correct. Rather, I would be concerned about the potential new arrivals, as mentioned by some of the friends here. Sooner or later, they'll come to Hong Kong. At present, they hold two-way permits. So for new arrivals, you assist them to find part-time jobs. For these potential new arrivals, you should do so also, such that when they really come to Hong Kong, they know that they can find a job and will not consider CSSA. The Labour Department and the SWD should join hands on this. Some residential care homes do need a lot of workers, maybe not full-timers, but part-timers working 4 to 5 hours a day. Who will respond? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Perhaps I should say something about child care services, as mentioned by Mr. Cheung. We understand Mr. Cheung's remarks. Will prudently look at our figures comprehensively, as well as district distribution. And for some of the services, we'll try to rationalize the issue. We're actually talking with the NGOs to see how resources can be better distributed amongst various districts to satisfy service needs. So we'll talk to the NGOs. But overall speaking, childcare service is a big issue. For different services, we'll review district demands. And in future, we'll have plans. For example, for independent kindergartens, we'll formulate plans in accordance with the characteristics of different districts. For the comprehensive review on CSSA scheme, we really have to assist the unemployed CSSA recipients to join the job market and self-finance themselves. We actually reshuffle the self-reliance scheme last year, and we've offered awards and incentives to them. So we'll see what more can be done. Mr. Wong Yong-man, yesterday I attended a forum in Hong Kong U, mainly about one-way permit holders, and of course, issues related to new arrivals were also discussed. We already have conflicts between Hong Kong and the mainland. That cannot be rescued, I can say. 10 odd years ago, when I was still a public affairs commentator, I asked Mr. Wong Wing-ping, who is responsible for labor. I discussed new arrivals with them. I wrote an article on the issue. I said, since they've come, so be it. But 10 odd years have passed. Services are seriously inadequate. Let's not talk about discrimination for the time being. For discrimination against new arrivals, the government should be held most liable. The government has not explained the policy to parties concerned. Moreover, very often when poor new arrivals apply for CSSA, they said nothing. Then people said that CSSA is for the lazy persons. But how many? 70% CSSA recipients are the disabled persons and the elders. The remaining 30% for poor families and the jobless. The government never talked about this CSSA scheme from a positive angle. The government never explained on the issue of discrimination for the incumbent CSSA recipients, even if they're Hong Kong permanent residents, they're being discriminated against. When I visit the districts, I'm often scolded because of the CSSA issue. I explained that these CSSA recipients are in misery. They can barely sustain themselves. Some of them have to rely on the $2,000 to $3,000 of children subsidy under the CSSA scheme. But of course, today's topic is poverty of new arrivals. I don't fully agree with the deputations here, but the government should be held most liable. For the CCF, some wealthy persons had reneged on their previous promises. If you want to avoid cross-boundary conflicts, then you must make your government policies commensurate with reality. The actual reality is that the recent CFA judgment had attracted huge feedback. In Sham Shui Po, day in, day out, we're receiving numerous such cases. We're very clear about the situation. As for income and asset limits, for new arrival CSSA recipients, well, some concerned groups are voicing this. When mainlanders want to come to Hong Kong, the vetting power rests with the mainland authorities, so it's very difficult to impose restrictions. Now look at this Hong. In the CFA case, that person possesses a property on the mainland in Guangzhou. Today we have bureau officials here, but even if you ask Mr. Matthew Chung here, it's useless. He'll only be scolded by us. These officials have to act in accordance with administrative instructions and instructions. So on this poverty issue, since we have a court judgment, there's nothing we can do. So the government should consider the policy level. How can we ease the plight of the new arrivals? Any response from the Bureau? Please be brief. Well, in simple terms, Mr. Wang Yongman asked about positioning. Well, the situation is clear. The CSSA scheme is a safety net to assist new arrivals to meet their basic needs. As for discrimination, we'll try as far as possible to assist new arrivals to get integrated into society. And we would like the community to accept them. We would like them to find a job as soon as possible and get integrated into society. We'll help them. Dr. Kwakaki, number one, in society, we have these most helpless grassroots, the new arrivals. They are labeled, they're stigmatized. That's saddening. Now, under a CFA judgment, a number of wrongful acts in the past had been rectified. Well, if we still harbor the same attitude against new arrivals, how can they get integrated into society? There's a wide wealth gap in our society. Income is unevenly distributed. C.Y. Leung always mentioned harmony, but that's lip service only. He's not speaking in accordance with his conscience. If we do not assist new arrivals to get integrated into society as soon as possible, they'll become even more helpless. They'll fall into a situation such that they can no longer come out of their plight. And the problem will pass from one generation to another. The government always says that it would like to eradicate intergenerational poverty. Well, I don't know whether the officials here have done anything, but a few years ago, whether intentionally or unintentionally, the government had been smearing CSSA recipients. Information was passed to major media to the effect that CSSA recipients are just like lazy bums. The government has not done anything. As for the existing welfare services, they have not addressed the exact problems. In the past, there are units to provide health services to new arrivals through NGOs and welfare agencies. At the moment, this has been cancelled across the board, and you now have these integrated family service centers. CSSA recipients already claim that that's not helpful to them. When will the government rectify its mistakes? Chairman, you know this also. In Tin Shui Wai and Tung Chung or Sham Shui Po and similar districts, we have the highest number of new arrivals. You can read this from newspaper reports. Because of a number of hindrances, these people are not going to obtain help and support. Many social workers need to have experience and professional knowledge to help them. So centers should be opened up as soon as possible to help them. And then for employment and family support, the answers just now were in a mess, including those answers on child care services. Existing quotas cannot meet the demands. Will the government target these people? Some women can actually serve as community nannies, but if the government does not review its policies, then only insulting wages will be given to these community nannies or these women. So when will a review be forthcoming? 3 questions. Mr. Chairman, I think I'll answer questions 2 and 3. Indeed, we have service centers for new arrivals. In 2004, after a review on the integrated family service centers, we looked at the modus operandi of these centers. Altogether, we got 67 centers. According to the Hong Kong U review report, certain groups, including new arrivals, should seek services in their neighborhood, and they should get integrated into Hong Kong society as soon as possible.
And if you now look at the integrated centers, they provide better service, more in-depth analysis with experienced social workers. We can make recommendations for rehousing. So we work through these integrated centers, and not so with the previous offices. So in our integrated services centers, we provide activities for the new arrivals. Now take last year as an example. We had 103 groups dedicated to the new arrivals, benefiting 1,800 new arrivals. So this shows that these integrated centers are for people, well, we welcome people, not only those with problems. We want to provide them some sort of a work network to let them understand the services we provide so that we can have an early detection of problems. And the modus operandi is such that, after monitoring by the University of Hong Kong, the mode was found suitable for continuing. So we're going to continue more or less in this kind of format, and we feel that this is appropriate. Now, as to the social, for these community nannies or other nannies providing similar help, now our format is now, or the arrangement is that they can do it as a voluntary work, some sort of a community care work. Yes, we already understand that, yes. Now we just like to say that whether those who are acting as community nannies or related parties, they feel that the present operation is appropriate, including the reward money, and because the reward money is tied with the fees charged, so we would like to use these reward money to make it affordable by those who are less well off. No, there's no need to go into the details of the content. We understand the content. The question asked was whether you are going to amend it or not amend it. So I'm not going to give you more time. Sir Albert Ho, 4 minutes. Now, you must have read that in Australia there was a bus. On the bus, a local woman, because of emotional disturbance, she actually, it's a kind of a Freudian slip, and criticizing the Asians and asked them to go back home. Now, there are many Hong Kong people emigrating to Australia, and when the Australians were to criticize these Hong Kong people, and if these Hong Kong people are your relatives, you can tell, or you can see that they would feel very, very hurt. Okay, they have made contributions to society, and they have got an identity, but they are being discriminated against because of the skin color. But in Hong Kong, it's no longer a difference in skin color, but a different identity nonetheless. And this is very, very sad. In fact, Hong Kong is basically an immigrant society. Our parents, grandparents, they were immigrants. So let us not be too emotional when we are discussing this. If you read the CFA ruling carefully, the judge was not being very aggressive, seeking for ideals, but rather looking at something very basic. Now, this is CSSA is a very basic right, and giving the recipients a very, very basic way of life. And then either you don't let them come to Hong Kong. If you let them come in, they cannot even make ends meet. They cannot even have enough to eat. Or, okay, if they live with their families. Now, what do you expect them to do? If there are 3 people, they are only relying on 2 CSSA incomes. And so you have one single mother looking after a child, so 2 people living on one CSSA income. So that's very unfair for the child. And then the figures also tell us that many of these people come here to work. Now, for example, in my building, there are many women. They work as a kind of a construction site worker. They climb on scaffoldings to do their work. And some, they look after elderly people, cleaning them in elderly centers. And people that many work that Hong Kong people don't want to do. So the burden is not really that big for Hong Kong people. Now, the new families into Hong Kong, they create a lot of, they are facing a lot of problems, obviously. And because of poverty, it results in family abuse, family violence, domestic violence. So the government should not just look at these figures, but probe into causes for domestic violence. So are there such investigation on domestic problems? So who would take up the question? Now, if they're not doing it, then they should be doing so now. You should be doing some sampling. Now, we have heard from some speakers that there is consensus in society that we should limit people getting CSSA. Now, I think different parties, different political parties, they have a consensus. And that is, if the recipient is hiding their assets, then they should be punished. That is the only consensus, as far as I understand. Now, we have heard very clearly these people are already in Hong Kong, and if they cannot even feed themselves, what do you expect them to do? Now, the government should do more. Those who are giving false reports regarding their assets, how can you let the public understand that no one is abusing the system? So only those who are eligible will get the assistance. Now, we have people of different ages in the room. Now, if you are able to work in the community, you would know, okay, about 20 years ago, you have an old husband and young wife, but no longer the case now. Okay, you may have a husband coming from China because their parents came to Hong Kong, and then the son, having grown up, goes back to China, and then married, and then brought the wife along. And there are cases where there are qualified nurses in China, but then coming to Hong Kong, the nurse qualification is not recognized in Hong Kong, and this is a mismatch in their talents. Now, you have 150 people coming to Hong Kong every day, and about 100 of them are within the working age. Now, is there any way to allow them to use their skills appropriately in Hong Kong? Otherwise, they would feel that their social position will drop significantly. Is there any such scheme to help them better use their talents? Mr. Tang, your point about qualifications is well taken. We certainly want them to be able to contribute to society by finding a suitable job. But regarding the recognition of their qualification, is not limited to new arrivals. This issue spans other territories, and not just those from China. Maybe Mrs. Leung can supplement. Now, we will give them information how or what they can do. This is not limited only to the new arrivals, but rather a mutual recognition of professional qualification, and belongs to different professional bodies. Now, okay, let me just check how many more of you want to speak. Now, okay, maybe I can extend the meeting by 10 minutes. Now, in fact, that most who have a feeling against the new immigrants, they have already left. Now, you haven't been able to tell us the actual situation. You're just quoting some figures. Now, one of you pointed out that maybe the figure has been changing over the years, about 341. Now, but the latest situation is that you have 110,000 getting CSSA, about 1/4 of the overall recipients. Now, let's assume that all of them are new arrivals. This is less than 1%, so it's really a very, very small number. Now, okay, so if they are, abusing the system, you have to catch them or prove them guilty. Otherwise, you have to assume that they are innocent. Now, if you just look at figures, now, what kind of reality are we facing? Is Hong Kong rich or poor? Well, we are rich. In 2013, our average income is $33,000 US. So it's like more than 20,000 Hong Kong dollars per month. So we are wealthy. Now, the new immigrants takes up about 1/3 quarter of our CSSA. So it's a bit like $8 billion per year. So we are spending this amount a year. So can we afford to feed them? Now, so what is CSSA, if you ask me?
In Hong Kong, once you're below a certain threshold, you can obtain CSSA. That means there are difficulties for you to live in Hong Kong. Whether or not you're a permanent resident of Hong Kong, if you are living under the poverty line, should we take care of you? We should take care of you. The overall wealth is $2 trillion. Surplus, $700 billion. So, from the money point of view, we should be capable of taking care of them. So why should we neglect them? Most importantly, sooner or later, they'll become Hong Kong people. Do we want them to integrate into Hong Kong society? Or do we want them to integrate into Hong Kong society? It is difficult for me to understand you if you choose not to integrate them into society. In 7 years' time, you have to make them feel belong to Hong Kong. There's this Chinese saying that everybody will have ups and downs. Now I help you, in future you help me. For the new arrivals, they have capabilities. They have their own qualifications. The question is how to turn qualifications into useful qualifications. How can we turn mainland qualifications into similar qualifications in Hong Kong such that they can get into highly paid jobs? And then there are jobs that Hong Kong people don't want. They're willing to take them up. 3 years ago, our birth rate was 0.99. One mother won't deliver one baby. Last year, 1.1. That is, one mother gives birth to just more than one baby. That means one male plus one female give one baby. What will happen 30 years ago? 50 years ago? 30 years or 50 years from now. In 50 years' time, 7 million people will become 3.5 million people. So if we stop all new immigrants from coming to Hong Kong, that will happen. So just now, some deputations add certain remarks. I think unless they can quote figures to show that new arrivals have caused problems that are unacceptable, I won't agree with them. As for rentals in private premises, it is impossible for these people to bear. Dr. Fernando Cheung, 3 minutes. Well, those who have scolded the new arrivals have all left. For those that have remained, I think today the most important issue is that we should clarify the new arrival poverty rate. That is, after considering welfare services and welfare benefits, that poverty rate was still 36.9. The overall poverty rate is 15.2. So the problem is serious. That means our policies are ineffective insofar as new arrivals are concerned. The problem is serious. Over 80% of these families have children. And about 10% or 9.1% are single-parent families. All these statistics indicate that we do need dedicated services for these new arrival families. It's not true that they're unwilling to work. 70% of them are working, but they're still poor. So, what other solutions do we have? Just now we mentioned childcare centers, after-school care support, and so forth, such that women can participate more in the job market, such that they can boost their income. The SWD said that there are surplus quotas, so you should conduct a review. There are so many voices saying that childcare services are inadequate, and you say you have surplus quotas. That means there are problems with your service distribution, service arrangements, and so forth. For single-parent households, you eradicate all centers for single parents and new arrivals. You say that your integrated family services centers will be able to solve the problem. But the reality is the opposite. If these centers are effective, why do we still have new arrival poverty? These households should have got rid of poverty already. So don't ask the officials any more questions. They'll just repeat what they've said. That's meaningless. Today, the deputation's remarks indicate that there's a serious discrimination situation. The government did not mention its population policy. The officials here did not touch upon that conflict. If you don't try to resolve that conflict, if this social conflict is to continue to grow, it will not be conducive to any sector of the community. Any response? 2 points. Dr. Cheung mentioned the poverty rate. We did pay attention to that. Well, he mentioned 36.9%. That's in 2012. At that time, the CSSA scheme still adopt the 7-year residency requirement. If you look at the 2012 data for new arrivals receiving CSSA, or new arrival families receiving CSSA, the rate was rather low. Yet in future, after we've adopted the 1-year residence requirement and the low-income subsidy scheme, will be able to assist these new arrival poor families more. Dr. Cheung mentioned the financial commitment of the government. Let me sum up by saying this. The government's policy to assist the poor basically covers 2 aspects. That is, to boost self-reliance and on the basis of reasonable provision of services, we would like to assist these people. We'll look at the financial affordability of the government. Will try to place as much resources as possible on your arrivals. Well, I think I'll draw a line here then. Thank you very much, deputations and officials, for your presence. Well, we'll have to have another meeting on the 28th of October. For the discussion items, we'll have a review and outlook on the poverty policy and also discuss the Commission on Poverty. We'll also invite deputations. If we have many deputations, we'll have 2 hours for them. Otherwise, 1 hour for deputations, 1 for government officials. And Dr. Fernando Cheung, we can work out the November agenda among ourselves. It's 4 weeks from now, so we'll discuss next time. Thank you. Thank you very much.